Tonight for dinner, we're having tomato soup and grilled cheese, which is one of our favorites. And I thought I would just do a casual cook with me video because I love watching these. I find them to be really cozy. So hopefully you do too. Whenever I'm cooking anything, I find it easier if I just chop all the things I need to chop at one time. So I'll get everything out and then just chop it all at once. So this way I'm not running back and forth between multiple things. I used to do that. So I would, like, let's say I would cut the onions and then get them in the pan, and I would think while the onions are cooking, I'll chop up the rest of the stuff. But I actually found that to be a lot more stressful because I was just running back and forth, you know, trying to make sure the onions didn't burn and then coming back over here, and I kept getting distracted. It ended up taking me longer, is what I'm trying to say. So I'm just gonna chop everything at one time. The nice thing about this soup is you don't really have to chop everything super fine because you're just gonna blend it all up. So I'm just gonna chop my onions. And these onions aren't that big, so I'm just gonna use 2. If you have the option to put your garbage close to where you normally cut stuff up, I highly recommend. The onions, carrots, and celery are all gonna go in the pan at the same time. So after I chop everything, I'm just gonna put it all in the same bowl. Is my whole body, like, is my whole head in the frame?
The top of your hair is cut off a teensy bit.
Do you think it's okay?
I think it's okay.
This celery is not looking the best. Another great thing about soup though, it's a great way to use up vegetables that are like not the freshest. Like, I have to use this up, so soup is the way to go. Okay. The only thing that I'm thinking about really when I'm chopping is that I want the pieces to be relatively the same size so that they cook at about the same time. Like, if you have really tiny pieces and then really big pieces, the tiny pieces are gonna cook way faster. So I just try to keep it sort of similar in size, but you don't have to go crazy. And the amount of things I'm using is so arbitrary. I just do what I feel like on that day. I do what I have. And another thing I love about soup, I just love soup, is it's easy to make a lot of, so you can easily have a lot of leftovers, and it's hard to mess up. Soups are really hard to mess up. I'm gonna start with 2 carrots, and then we'll just see what that looks like. For the carrots, they are gonna take the longest to cook out of all 3 of these things. So I don't want them to be too big, but like this, if I cut this in half, it would be a lot smaller than this piece. So I think I'm just gonna do this in rounds. And like I said, everything's gonna get blended up. Don't go crazy. Okay, this is what I have. I knew that was gonna happen. And I think I'm gonna leave it. Should I do one more carrot? I'm gonna do one more little carrot. Look at this, it's perfect. Garbage placement, I'm telling you. Okay, and then the last thing to chop is garlic, which I forgot to take out. I am doing a modest amount of garlic. Usually when a recipe calls for garlic, I will like quadruple it. But I don't really want this soup to be extremely garlicky, so 3 medium-ish cloves. could just chop it, but if you watched any of my shorts, you know I love this thing. My little garlic mincer, so. And everything's gonna get blended anyway, but. Okay, that's all the chopping. Now all the rest of the stuff is at the stove. I'm using my Dutch oven for this. I use my Dutch oven for everything. I love it so much. So I'm just gonna turn it on like medium lowish. Put some olive oil. Could also use butter. And I'll let that heat up for a minute, and then I'll put in the bowl of carrots, onions, and celery. Since all my chopping is done, it leaves me with little pockets of time while things are cooking, while the pan is heating, to do little bits of cleanup. So like right now, the pan is heating up, and so I'm just gonna clear off this counter. And doing that when you have little pockets of time really helps when you're finally done cooking and the last thing you wanna do is clean up. And now the pan is heated up and the counter is clean. The oil is hot, so I'm gonna put in all that. And I'm someone that salts everything as I go, so with each new thing I'll put more salt. So I'm gonna put some salt in now. I'm just gonna leave this to saute until all the vegetables are nice and soft. I actually forgot that I have to wash my basil because I bought it from the store and the leaves are just a little bit dirty. So I'm gonna pick the leaves off of here, put them in my little colander, and give them a nice rinse. This soup uses a lot of basil. That's part of what makes it so good. And hopefully soon I'll be able to use my own basil. I planted some in my garden a couple weeks ago, but it's not really doing anything. I think it's because I put it unintentionally in a spot that gets more shade than I thought, and basil likes a lot of sun. So I just moved it today to a sunny spot that I know gets sun all day, and we'll see. Like, I'm looking at it right now, it looks a little sad. So hopefully a few days in its new home and it will start thriving. The key to this soup is continuously adding basil throughout the whole process. So I have some basil here. I'm just gonna like mash it up, tear it in half, and throw it in. And then once this basil gets wilty, I will throw in more, and I just keep doing that throughout this entire process. Throw basil in, let it get wilty, throw more, let that get wilty. Basically, you can't have too much basil. I just wanted to show you something because when I was first learning how to cook, and everyone in every recipe said, cook the onions until they become translucent, I was like, but what does that actually mean? Like, what is that supposed to look like? See how this onion is basically see-through? You can see the wood through the onion. This onion is translucent. I just wanted to share that because it took me way too long to actually learn what the onions were supposed to look like when I was cooking them up. See, my basil's wilty, so I'm gonna add more. So this is really thin, and the other one I showed was also really thin. If you look at some of the thicker pieces, well, it is really getting there. You see how it's not as see-through, it's a little bit more opaque still. So once all the onions get to be like this one, really nice and see-through, then I'm gonna move on to the next step, which is add the, oh, no it's not, it's add the garlic. Actually, I'm gonna do that now. And especially minced up really tiny like this, the garlic is gonna be cooked in 30 seconds. This is what I'm gonna put in for my broth. It's just this Better Than Bouillon vegetable broth. I love this stuff. You could also use chicken broth, but I just usually use vegetable broth. This would be a great meal if you're vegetarian. So I just mix this with some water. I'm gonna put it with a little bit of hot water in here and then fill the rest up with normal room temperature water. And then I'm gonna add this to the soup. I ultimately want 4 cups of broth, and this you usually use, or I usually use 1 teaspoon-ish per cup of water. So what I'll do is I just will take a rough 4 teaspoons, let's just say that's 2, 4, a little generous 4, and then it dissolves best in hot water. So I boil some water with my kettle, and then I pour a little bit in, just so that I can dissolve the paste. This is obviously ultra concentrated right now. And then I'll fill the rest of this up. This is a 2-cup measure, so I'll just fill the rest of this up, and then I will pour just 2 more cups of regular water into the pot, and that will be my 4 cups of broth. While that is doing its thing, I am gonna grate some cheese because that's got a good few minutes. So I am doing cheddar and Gruyere. A lot of times I just do cheddar because I always have cheddar, but I actually had this Gruyere in the fridge because I was going to make French onion soup like a couple weeks ago, and I never made it. And so when I went looking for the cheddar, I saw I had this, and this is so yummy with the cheddar in grilled cheese. So I'm just gonna grate both. I also thought that I had a sandwich loaf of bread in the freezer downstairs, like that I had made it another time. Turns out I don't. But I do have just a regular sourdough loaf, like a round or oval loaf. The only thing is it's frozen solid, so I just took it out. I might have to like stick it in the oven on warm or something so that it will be ready in time. We're not going to use all this cheese for these 2 grilled cheeses, but we use cheddar in our eggs and just for everything. We're a big cheese family. Oh my gosh, my arm. Okay, I don't want to pull this up because the cheese is going to go everywhere, so I'm just going to do this one right in the same bowl. And I am going to cut the rind off because it's kind of thick. The amount of self-control it's taking right now not to just bite into this. I could eat this whole thing. This one's fun to shred, actually. You know, I really should have chosen a bigger bowl because when I take this thing off, you'll see. Okay. Here we go. Perfect. Because the thing is, I want to mix it. One thing about me, I always joke with my husband that my toxic trait is I always choose bowls that are too small for the task at hand. And this is like exhibit 500. It's gonna be fine. I had to. I'm gonna just taste the broth because it's been reducing down for a bit. Yummy. So now I'm gonna add the tomatoes. I like to use tomato puree because I like my tomato soup to be really, really smooth. And you can use crushed tomatoes and then, you know, it's all gonna get blended anyway, but I just find that the puree gives me the texture that I like. So I do 2 cans and then I'll just rinse these out with a little bit of water. And you know what I think this needs? More basil. And obviously if you don't want your soup to be that basil-y, don't add as much, but I really like mine to have a nice strong basil flavor. So now I will just let this come up to a simmer and let it simmer for a few minutes to just finish softening up the carrots. I'm looking for them to basically be smashable on the sides, and then I'll blend it and the soup is just about done. Okay, the carrots are smashable. So if I take one, I can cut it and I can, it's hard to lift, smash it like that. So I think that means we're ready to blend. I always turn the heat off before I blend because I don't need any extra hot liquid shooting at me. I also always use my immersion blender. If you don't have an immersion blender, you can use a regular blender, but just be very careful because it's extremely hot. So you need to make sure that you only ladle in a little bit of soup at a time, which is a little tedious because you have to ladle it in, blend it, and then pour that out. Ladle more in, blend it, and then pour that out. But it gets the job done. However, I have this stick blender here, so I'm just gonna use this. So now, a very important step, taste it. I think it tastes really good. The salt level is definitely good for me, so I'm not gonna add any more salt, but I am gonna add just a little bit of sugar. I usually add a little sugar, like I'm talking half a tablespoon to a tablespoon when I'm making tomato-based dishes because the tomato is acidic and I just like the sugar to kind of balance out the flavors. So I'm gonna add a little bit of sugar. I'm also trying to decide, I feel like this is a little thicker than it sometimes comes out. So I could add a little bit of water, but I don't know if I want to do that because I like the taste. Let's taste again and then see. The sugar really helped. It doesn't make it taste sweet, it just takes away some of the acidity, or I guess balances out some of the acidity. So it's not so, bitter is not really the word, but it just helps the flavors just kind of like round out. I'm not gonna add water, but I might add just a little splash of cream. Sometimes I do this, sometimes I don't, but I think I'm gonna do it today. Just a tiny splash. Ooh, it looks so cool. And then I'm gonna taste it one final time, and if I think it tastes good, then it'll be ready to eat, and I will just make the grilled cheeses. Actually decided I want a little bit more salt, but I like the texture. I think it's gonna be really good. I reached the part that's still frozen. This is from the loaf we've been cutting from in the morning, so I think I can get one sandwich out of this. I'll be fine. This soup really is so good, especially paired with grilled cheese. So I hope you make it, I hope you love it, and I will see you in my next video.